In this video, we will see the telescopic theological narrative, the Bible, as it develops through its storyline. The story of the Bible begins with the creation narrative in Genesis and tells us about the fall of man from a state of innocence and the consequences of fall that followed. The fall also came with the promise of God. Following the fall came the promise of God's redemption in Genesis 3. And the redemptive plan begins with the call of Abraham and the promise of God that Abraham's offspring will be blessed, and through the descendants of Abraham, nations will be blessed. God's choice of choosing Abraham unto true blessedness by coming to true knowledge of God is made out of his sovereignty and does not show favoritism. He blesses Abraham to bless the nations. Abraham is called out of the ancient city of Ur in ancient Mesopotamia into monotheistic Yahwehism from the polytheistic ancient Near Eastern religions. Some of the detestable practices of the ancient Near East includes child sacrifices and temple cult prostitution. So these were some of the common practices in all of ancient Near Eastern religions. The self-revelation of Yahweh found in Genesis is found to be a theological polemic on the ancient Near Eastern religious beliefs and their worldviews, and is meant to teach theological truth of the one true God to Israel. Abraham has a son called Isaac. Isaac has two sons called Jacob and Esau. Esau is your typical macho man, and Jacob is the mommy's boy. However, the Lord chooses Jacob to bless him and make a nation out of him, so that men may know it is by the strong arm of God and not by human grit and fervor. Even though they themselves come from the Lord, for whatever we have is from the Lord. However, in the Lord's wise choice, it is impossible for us to miss seeing the Lord's hand at work, and therefore much easier for us to put our trust in Him, which is the best thing for all of us to do. The descendants of the 12 sons of Jacob eventually go on to be the nation of Israel. But however, right now, as the book of Genesis ends, they are under captivity, they are under the yoke of slavery in Egypt. However, the Lord raises a leader by name Moses to lead them out of this captivity, and he does so by the 10 plagues against the Egyptian, the land of Egypt. So by this, the Lord leads them out of the captivity by a strong arm with this 10 plagues against the Egyptian pantheon. So we have the 10 plagues, and we have the river Nile was actually a god in Egypt. Pharaoh was considered a god in Egypt. So all these plagues were actually targeted against the Egyptian gods, and they were to turn the people to true blessedness of knowing the one true God of heaven and earth. Although the Bible doesn't name the Pharaoh of Egypt, the sudden conversion of the Pharaoh of Akhenaten, from polytheism to monotheism in the 14th century BC is notable in this regard. So the people of Israel come out of the land of Egypt, and they go and they are crossing the desert to go into the promised land. And in the desert, the God of Israel gives them the laws that they are to keep through his prophet Moses. The laws concerning the religious, societal and civil function of the Israelite community was handed to Israel through Moses. The Levitical laws reminded the Israelites about the holiness of God and prescribes for them right religious practices, while the civil and the moral law is meant to govern their societal function. Just as much as a car maker prescribes the right way to use his product in the user manual, the creator of life gives his prescription of the right way to live through his laws, failing which the consequences of bad action will follow. Through Moses' successor Joshua, the Lord leads the Israelites into the land of Canaan, the promised land, in miraculous ways by driving out the Canaanites, not on account of the righteousness of Israelites, but on account of the wickedness of the Canaanites. So the Lord reminds the people of Israel that He has not chosen them because of any righteousness of their own, but merely in His sovereignty. He is free to choose whoever He pleases, and He has chosen the least among the all the nations to make a nation out of them. And He reminds them that He's driving the Canaanites and the Israelites and the Egyptians. He's driving the Canaanites out, and the judgment He has executed in driving out the Canaanites, and previously in the case of the Egyptians, were account of their wickedness, right? We had seen the practices, the religious practices that were happening here, the child sacrifices, the temple cult prostitution, and many other things. So, on account of their wickedness and the abomination the Lord saw in all of this, He is executing His judgment. So, if He's reminding the Israelites that if they turn wicked at some point in the future, they will also suffer the same fate. However, the Israelites now in the land of Canaan, they have taken possession, but they have not taken complete possession control yet, and they continue to face some military aggression from their neighbors. This is because they go into the land and the Lord asks them to do certain things a certain way, they disobey, and therefore uh, the the consequences of that is that now the neighbors they are giving a lot of problems. The Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and at a point in the book during the period of the Judges, so we have a book of Judges where from the 12 tribes of Israel, right? Uh, at every time of crisis, at every time of national military crisis, God raises one leader to lead the fight against the aggressive neighbors, the neighbors who are showing military aggression. However, eventually the Israelites come to think that only a king can unify the 12 tribes of Israel to form a united front to survive the aggression of the neighbors. However, God warns them that human kings will fail on account of the great power concentrations that rest with them. They will thwart the common good to serve their personal good and import the sons and daughters of the people of Israel into slave labor and take possessions of their lands in the name of national interest. But people persisted. So the people still wanted the king in spite of God's warnings, and God granted them their request because He was looking beyond the failings of these human kings that will happen. He sees the future. He knows these human kings are going to fail, but He is seeing the perfect messianic king, right? Who's going to come. So He is looking to the perfect the plans, the good plans and purposes He has in the perfect messianic king, who's Jesus Christ, and therefore He gives them what they want. He allows this to happen. So many kings arise in Israel. God raises them up. However, they lead the people astray to many sins. Now, there is a man by name David who God raises up from a nobody to become a somebody, the king of Israel. And God gives him the promise of that the messianic king will actually descend from his lineage. Though David himself had his own feelings in his own life, adultery and murder to be precise, he earned the name uh, of man after God's own heart because he repented and sought God in all earnestness, and therefore he earned the name of man after God's own heart. So here we see the Davidic covenant where God says that from his line, the Davidic line, the Messianic king will actually come. So after the period of the united monarchy, that is during the period of David and his son Solomon, the kingdom of Israel splits into two. That is the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. So the northern kingdom was called Israel, and the southern kingdom was called Judah. So north is called sometimes called uh, uh, yeah. So the north is called Israel, and the southern kingdom was called Judah. So, as I had said, there were many wicked kings that came to rule the nation of Israel, and one such king was King Ahab. He is specially noted for this persecution of prophets of God, and those prophets who opposed his wicked rule. Uh, he he persecuted, and he was someone who thought he can do anything with power. He tried to take the uh, somebody's land, and they because he's a king, he can take whatever he wants, and when he faced some resistance, he put that person to death. So Naboth, so he's noted for the murder of Naboth. So during this time, what is happening is the Lord is seeing the wickedness that is happening here in the northern nation of Israel, and he is choosing Assyria, a nation that is rising up as a strong nation, subjugating and conquering other nations. So he is choosing this nation as an agency or as a vessel through which he will execute a judgment on the northern nation of Israel. So what happens is Assyria is rising up as a strong nation and subjugating and conquering other nations. And in the mid 8th century BC, the kingdom of Israel and Syria are trying to form a coalition to fight the new power Assyria. And they're trying to force the southern king, the king of Judah, King Ahaz, to come into their coalition so that they could form a united front against Assyria. Okay. But what is happening here is Ahaz is being told by the prophet Isaiah to trust in the Lord and not to turn to either Assyria for help or either this coalition of the north and Syria. Okay, but what happens is Ahaz doesn't trust the Lord and he turns to Assyria itself for help. And what happens is Assyrians come and destroy the north and Syria. Okay, they totally uh, they demolish, they take, they destroy uh, the coalition formed by the north and Syria, and they take Judah as a vassal state. So they have to, so Judah ends up paying tribute. So here the judgment on the northern kingdom is executed for their wickedness. Lord uses Assyria, and Judah now, because they didn't trust the Lord, they have now become a vassal state. So while the human kings kept failing, the prophets in their court kept prophesying hope in the name of the messianic king. So here we see the prophecies of Isaiah. He was living during this time, and while the human kings are failing, they are repeatedly prophesying hope for the people, and that is in the name of the messianic king. So after the fall of the north to Assyria, King Hezekiah, the successor of King Ahaz in the south, tried to come out of the Assyrian yoke of vassalage, and he rebelled. However, Assyria laid siege, and Isaiah encouraged Hezekiah to put his trust in the Lord, and he was miraculously delivered. So Hezekiah uh, went on to institute many religious reforms in South, and he reinstituted the celebration of the Jewish Passover. However, even Hezekiah had some failings in his life. So he looks like to be a good king, right? But he also had some failings in his life. So such is the deadliness of power concentrations that come, right? Because when you are a king, you think you are everything, right? And you don't have, and instead, God has appointed you as to administer the common good of the people, but instead you think you are everything. Pride and things like pride beseeches you, and you fall, we end up falling to that. So we humans, we have to be very careful with things like that. So later in his life, Hezekiah was ill with a boil and an inflammation, which Isaiah initially thought would be fatal. However, he was miraculously uh, he miraculously recovered. Okay, he miraculously recovered, and because of this, people wanted to come see him. So various ambassadors wanted to come see him and congratulate him on his recovery. And one such person who came was the son of the king of Babylon. Okay, so Hezekiah was immediately flattered by this, and he ended up showing all his wealth, his arms and stores of Israel, Jerusalem, which is the capital of the southern kingdom, Judah, and he revealed too much, and so therefore Isaiah, the prophet of the Lord, confronted him, and he told uh, Hezekiah that the Babylonian kingdom, the king of Babylon, will eventually take Judah captive. So after Hezekiah, there is an evil king that comes to rule in the south, who is Manasseh. So Manasseh reigns in the south, and he establishes the local shrines. So these are the local shrines from the Canaanite religion of Baal, Asherah, and Molech. Okay, so this is where you have all the child sacrifices, the temple cult, prostitution, and all such things. This is because the people loved it. Okay, the people loved it, and he thought he could generate some revenue from it, and the people loved it because all these Canaanite deities like the same things as natural man likes. Okay, these Canaanite deities were actually uh, gods and goddesses of material prosperity. So the attraction of Israelites to the Canaanite deities reflects the state of natural man. Man is naturally religious, and natural man fashions religion in his own natural interest. And these were the Canaanite deities. The Canaanite deities of Asherah, Baal, and Molech were deities to help secure material prosperity, fertility, and abundance, and thus reflected the natural interest of natural man. So, for this reason, the Bible reminds the mind of natural man is at enmity with God. Natural man, while is focused on the temporal well-being, the earthly things, God is interested in our eternal well-being. So thus, in the light of the failure of the human kings, God's plan is already looking forward to the perfect messianic king, and Judah is taken into captivity by going to be taken into captivity by the new emerging power in the ancient Near East, which is Babylon. So after Assyria, Babylon becomes a big power here in the ancient Near East. So Babylon becomes the new emerging power, and God is going to use Babylon as an instrument of judgment on Judah. So this is the judgment executed by God on Judah using the Babylonian king. Okay, so after the battle of Carchemish in 605 BC, the king Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon besieged Jerusalem, resulting in the tribute paid by King Joachim. So first he takes control and he makes the king pay a tribute. So Joachim refused to pay the tribute in Nebuchadnezzar's fourth year, which led to another siege in Nebuchadnezzar's seventh year, culminating in the death of the Joachim. And the exile to Babylon of the king Joachim. Okay, so the names are a little difficult here to pronounce. Jeconiah. Okay, so he the king who refused to pay the tribute, he's put him to death, and he's taken the new king to as a exile, as a captive to his kingdom, okay, to Babylon, his court, and many others. Jeconiah's successor Zedekiah and others were exiled in Nebuchadnezzar's 18th year, and a later deportation occurred in Nebuchadnezzar's 23rd year. So these deportations, it was common practice for when a nation takes another nation as captive, they will take the they will take the king captive, okay, and often execute him, torture him, and execute him, and they will take the best among the captive nations. Okay, they will take the best among the captive nations. So their best artisans, their craftsmen, their scholars, and they will also take the it was common military practices in those days that they would also take the women. So the soldiers would end up taking their women, their virgins. So this was the horrible scene that is happening, and this is the king, the kingdom of Judah is suffering this fate because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord, and God is using Babylon as an instrument of judgment on Judah. So while uh, the Babylon has taken so many captives, some prophets are also part of that. So some of them include Jeremiah, Daniel. All these people are there as prophets, and they are prophesying hope in the name of the Messianic King to the people of Israel. They're asking them to look forward to the coming Messianic age. And so here we have Daniel, a scholar in the court of Nebuchadnezzar, and one who who God chose to uh, make him rise to great heights in his in Nebuchadnezzar's establishment for his ability to interpret dreams and visions given by the Lord. That he had told that had told the great king of new powers that will emerge in the Mediterranean. Okay, so he is, and Nebuchadnezzar is given dreams, and Daniel interprets them. And in one of the dreams, the king Daniel tells him that there would be new powers in this ancient Near Eastern region, that is the Mediterranean. So these are nations surrounding the Mediterranean. So after the Babylonians, he says the Persians would come, then the Greeks, and then the Romans, and then you will have the inauguration of the Messianic kingdom with the coming of Jesus Christ. Okay, so that is what Daniel is saying. So Daniel is a prophet of the Lord, and he is looking forward to the Messianic age. So, and just as Daniel had prophesied, the kingdom of Babylon waned in influence in the region, and the new king, Persian dominance started to begin. So, after the Persians had gained control of the region, the new king, the Persian king Cyrus, for a strategic advantage, allowed the Jews to return to their homeland. So this is because Egypt had provided support to his opponents, to the opponents of the Persian king in the Persian Median War. So this is the war he actually eventually takes control of the region, and Egypt had provided support to his opponents in this war. Okay, to the Lydians he had recently conquered, and the Babylonians that he had recently conquered to gain control of the region. So therefore, they Egypt, they also had close ties to the Greeks, who were a thorn in his side and resistant to his dominion in the region. Okay, so they were resistant. So Egypt was strategically placed next to the Jewish land. Okay, so he is allowing the Jews to return so he could gain a strategic foothold in the region. So he would gain the permanent loyalty of the Jews by allowing them to return, and In case the Egypt was giving him any problems, he would have a strategic foothold in Palestine to to control the Egyptian aggression if they were to challenge his domain. Okay, so this is Cyrus's interest in letting the Jews return to their land. However, the Lord is using natural events. These are so the Lord doesn't. Cyrus doesn't know the plans the Lord has in mind. So in allowing this these things to happen, so in making these things to come pass, that of allowing the Jews to go back to their homeland. So Cyrus lets them go, but this is actually uh, in God's eyes, the messianic plan is actually progressing through all of this. So that is what is happening, and here you can find the archaeological find of Cyrus's cylinder, which is cited often as a extra biblical evidence, which corroborates with the biblical account of the Jewish people returning to their land. Okay, of Cyrus allowing the Jewish people to return to their land. So some record of this is found in the Persian records. Okay, so some record of the account in the given in the Bible is found also in the Persian records. So the Lord's providence overruled human events to further his plans. A remnant returned under Ezra, Nehemiah, and the rebuilding of the Jewish temple began. So Ezra and Nehemiah, Jewish leaders and prophets, they're going back. Jewish people are going back, and the rebuilding of the second temple has begun. So prophets prophesied hope and also the Lord's good plans in the Messianic King. So again, just as Daniel had prophesied that the Persian kingdom will also wane in influence, and the Greeks would come after the Persians. Alexander the Great took great control of this region. But after the death of Alexander the Great, his kingdom was divided into four. Okay, so we have Egypt, the Seleucian Empire, the kingdom of Pergamon, and Macedon. So between his commanders, his kingdom divides into four. Now, uh, when the Jewish land was governed by the Ptolemies, the Jews had little to no problems. Okay, under the Ptolemies. However, with the power struggle between the Ptolemies and the Seleucians, when the when the Jewish land came under the Seleucian control, the Seleucian Empire, now the Jews started begin to have a lot of problems. Okay, Antiochus, the Seleucian king, pushed for Hellenization of the Jewish culture for economic and political reasons. So he wanted to push Greek influence into Jewish culture. He wanted to strip the Jews of their religious identity and make them Greek culture and religion. So what Seleucian king is seeing is this religion is the main identity for the Jews, that is keeping them united, right? So when they are united, they are more powerful. So if you break that identity, then it will be more convenient for us to govern govern over them. Okay, so when they if you break that religious identity that makes them one, uh, then it will be more convenient for us. That's what he thinks, and therefore the Jewish party, in response to this Seleucian pressure, was divided on two lines. So one was a liberal group trying to accommodate this Hellenization. Okay, so one was the liberal group willing to accommodate Greek culture. Another was a Puritan group. So in 168 BC, in 168 BC, the great king Antiochus Epiphanes invaded Jerusalem, captured the city, and he marched into the Jewish temple, erected a statue of the Greek god Zeus, and sacrificed a pig on the altar. So this was extremely offensive to the Jews, and this and this triggered the Puritan group to launch a rebellion known as the Maccabean Revolt. And it is to be noted that the Pharisees mentioned in the New Testament actually descend from this Puritan group that led this rebellion. So this Puritan group actually defeats the Seleucian army in a guerrilla warfare, and they establish the Hasmonean dynasty. But during the Roman time, so after this time, you have Romans taking control of over this region after the Punic Wars, and during that time, this Hasmonean dynasty becomes a client state to Roman control. Okay, so they are becoming a state where they have to pay tribute to the Romans. They are coming under the control of the Romans. That is this Puritan group which defeated the Seleucian army in a guerrilla warfare and established the Hasmonean dynasty. But under the Romans, they become a Roman client state. So during